First, we had Wes Huff versus Billy Carson.
It's the Gospel of Barnabas.
The Gospel of Barnabas is a known forgery. I mean, no one's referring to the Gospel of Barnabas as anything other than...
If you say it's a known forgery, but I'm going to go with that.
Now we have Wes Huff versus Aaron Abke.
Guys ready to rock? Let's do it, man.
But will Wes the Billy Slayer be able to dismantle Aaron Abke's positions when it comes to Jesus and the Bible?
None of the Greek passages that you've been pulling up use the word Ebionin as poor.
The two gentlemen are joined by respective teammates. Wes is joined by Dr. Stephen Boyce, PhD in theology, and Aaron is joined by Cam Waters, who is a very passionate animal rights activist. I was about to say he's a vegetarian who cares a lot about animals. And that is exactly what they're there to debate, whether or not Jesus was for or against animal sacrifice.
What we want to talk about that makes Jesus unique was that there is a thread of anti-sacrificial ritual amongst the prophets that Jesus then realized fully and embodied when he disrupted the temple animal sacrifice.
The debate was monitored by Anton Wisbicki, who was the least unbiased monitor since Anderson Cooper monitored the debate between Trump and Hillary Clinton back in 2016.
Which he bade us observe. Okay, I'm gonna chime in here, Aaron, because you said it was gonna be 5 minutes and it's already been double that. So
the Ebionites
let him
would have deviated over
finish
400
his quote.
years.
I think you should finish his quote.
Well, I'm just trying to be, cautious of our time here because we're running out of time.
He said they set them 2 by 2.
I think that's the most unique thing that we want to bring to the table to talk about Jesus is that he's standing up against bloodshed.
I think the most unique thing Jesus
violence.
did was resurrect from the dead.
Well, that's amazing too.
Can I ask a clarifying question really quick? Isn't Jesus above the law because he's God?
No.
Nevertheless, it was an interesting debate with both parties bringing their respective viewpoints to Jesus and to the Bible. If you haven't watched the debate, I'll just give you a brief rundown of the main positions for and against these claims. To back up their position, Cam and Aaron point to the several places in the Bible where it seems like Jesus is overtly against animal sacrifice.
Isaiah 6:6 twice, which is the most anti-sacrifice passage in the Old Testament.
Well, hold on.
One of the patristic quotes we have has Jesus saying, "I do not desire to eat lamb with you on this Passover." And that's specifically why he uses bread and wine, because they were against the idea of eating meat altogether.
They also look at Jesus going into the temples and flipping the tables of the money changers, which Aaron and Cam believe is Jesus basically going up against this business of selling animals for sacrifice to pilgrims.
And so we believe Jesus would have been vehemently against sacrifices.
Basically, the position is that Jesus was actually not part of mainstream Jewish society at the time, but was part of the Essenes, which was a breakaway Jewish sect that practiced vegetarianism and that was against animal sacrifice.
The Essenes, or that community or that type of thinking, was anti-temple. Jesus was everything but that, right? In fact, he even called it his father's house. So that is he can't be a Essene because, or even a part of that sect because they were against the temple.
They weren't against the idea of a temple. They were against the temple sacrifice system. They believe you've turned my father's house into a den of thieves. The temple was always meant to be a house of prayer for all nations. And so they were against what was happening in the temple or to the temple. They believed it was a defilement of the temple.
Another position that they raise is that Jesus is all about the kingdom of God, right? He wants to bring the kingdom of God down here. He wants to essentially restore Eden, right? To create a new Eden on earth. And Cam's position here is that in Eden, no animal was killed and certainly not sacrificed.
You will not hurt nor destroy on my holy mountain. And that Hebrew word destroy there has a root that actually means to slaughter an animal, to sacrifice. So that messianic vision, which he comes to fulfill, like we talked about in Luke, when he declares this is the year of the Lord, part of that messianic vision is no more animal sacrifice. There's no slaughter in the kingdom of heaven.
So Jesus' vision is the vision of a world where the leopard lies with the child, where the lion hangs out with the calf or whatever, right? Where animals hang out together, where humans and animals hang out together, no killing, no slaying, no sacrifice. Now, Wes and Stephen came for a fight, bringing to bear their extensive knowledge on the Bible and also their knowledge of Hebrew and Greek. They point to Jesus and the healing of the leper as a clear indication that Jesus was not only not against temple sacrifice, but even encouraged it.
So Jesus will overturn the tables because he's mad at the sacrificial system, but he will tell a random leper that it's okay to go to the temple and sacrifice because he won't be accepted within.
Well, can I add
Absolutely,
to-
because he's opposing the temple system when he goes into the temple and the priestly class and their corruption of the temple. This is a leper on the street who he loves and has compassion for, and he wants the guy to be integrated back into Jewish society.
Because after he heals the leper, he tells him to go to the temple, to go to the priest. Now Aaron says, well, it doesn't say in the text, go and make a sacrifice. But here Wes points to the historical context and says, well, there's really no reason for the leper to go to the priest without a sacrifice.
The fact that Jesus tells people to sacrifice compromises your position in general.
No.
If Jesus is against temple sacrifice,
He's against his own teaching.
and then he's compromising his moral values because society wants him to.
Again, I'll explain our point. Where we disagree is that if Jesus has the compassion to heal this leper who's been ostracized from the Jewish community and he heals him, well, what good is him healing him if he's still ostracized from the community? He would not have been allowed to go back into the community without offering the sacrifice.
Basically, Wes and Stephen are of the understanding that Jesus is not going against the temple sacrifice system at all. He is calling them thieves because they are overcharging the price for the animals to be sacrificed.
So Jesus is angry with the money changers because they're making merchandise off of animal sales, not because they're selling animals, but because they're making money off of animals. That's why he flips the table and calls them a den of thieves, which, by the way, he's quoting Jeremiah chapter 7
Yes.
when he uses that language there.
He's upset about them profiting from the temple system and the killing of the animals.
Exactly. We're saying it's both.
There is evidence even in the synoptics that Jesus was upset about the animals when he quotes Hosea 6:6. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. And if you knew what this means, you would not have condemned the innocent. And of course, he can't be talking about the person offering the sacrifice because that's why they're offering it. They're not innocent. The priest who kills the animal can't be innocent because they're murdering an animal. He must be referring to the animals who are innocent.
So Jesus says, you've made my father's house a den of thieves. Here Cam says, well, you could also translate it to, you have made my father's house a den of murderers. The word being used in the Bible denoting both or either or murderer and thief.
If you look at Jeremiah 7:11, the Hebrew there is den of paritz. And the most accurate translation of that word is actually violent ones. If you look at the concordance with a sub definition of murderers, when Jesus shows up, they're not murdering anyone in the temple. They're not murdering people. They're murdering animals. That's what the bloodshed is.
Hebrew isn't a very nondescript language that requires context. And so there's a semantic range for all sorts of words. And so context merits what we're talking about there.
Sure.
So you could ascribe murder, but it may or may not actually mean that.
Stephen is quick to point out, well, if Jesus was so against sacrifice, why did his parents, Joseph and Mary, sacrifice a pigeon?
Mary and Joseph, they brought doves.
Okay.
I think we all agree with that, right? They brought doves at Jesus, with Jesus there, right? You're saying that Jesus grew up with an Essene sect. That was his sect. Those were his
He grew up
people.
with the Essene sect.
Or a sect
emerged
of the
from that.
Essenes.
That was his lineage in some form or fashion.
Okay, well, obviously not from Joseph and Mary, right? If they're taking doves to be killed in the temple.
I mean, they could have converted back to orthodoxy for all we know. There's a lot of explanations for that. It might not even be a historical fact for all we know.
I think you're continuing to make our point, gentlemen, and I appreciate the conversation, is that it takes a lot of work to attach Jesus to this group.
So both parties come from different perspectives, both make compelling arguments, and at the end of the day, there's no clear winner. Aaron and Cam point to passages where Jesus says that sacrifice is wrong. Stephen and Wes point to passages where Jesus literally encourages sacrifice. And they also point to the situation with Jesus helping Simon Peter and his crew on the ship catch fish, with Cain being like, well, there was magical fish and it was a metaphor.
I want to get into we can get into the fish stuff. That'd be great. I love that conversation. It's one of my favorite ones.
Their boats almost tipped over.
Right.
But he still helped them catch fish. He's helping them catch it.
Miracle fish, yeah. So again,
so it's not
they're
real
fake.
fish.
So they're fantasy.
They're magic fish.
So yeah, so very different perspectives, and that is kind of like the point that I want to get at. I'm not so much interested in exactly what they said and what the arguments were, but where it comes from, because I believe they both have good points, solid argumentation, but that they come from very, very different points of view. And you really see this in the comment section, which is really split between people who really resonate with the kindness, with the forgiveness, with the love, with the patience, with the respect that Aaron and Cam show the other guys, whereas other people prefer Stephen and Wes's more sort of diligent, coldly logical, text, sort of faithful rendition of the debate. So let's take a look at the comment section to really get an overview of how this debate is splitting the waters, especially between these two modes of cognition. So Brandy writes here, Team Aaron, I love how from the start Aaron reminds that they are brother and gave love, true embodiment of Jesus. Ola says the embodiment of love and compassion radiates from Aaron and Cam, with Christopher adding, love the way Aaron carries himself, so graceful and peaceful. I think it says so much about a person. On the Team West side, an unknown commenter says, if you're here judging the debate based on who radiated the most love, this is a debate about what the truth is, not a personality test. Someone here says, that's Jason, but the truth is simply unconditional love. And by this will all men know you're my disciples, by your love for one another, quoting Jesus. Another one writes here that I'm not a Christian, but from my outside perspective, it's quite clear who comes from a deeper place of kindness, respect, and patience. Glendo is saying that heartful messages means nothing if you don't even understand the words of the Bible. Shots fired. Sandra adds to Glendo by saying this is a debate, not a therapy session. Tom adds, we don't care about feelings, or vibes, or resonating with what a dude is saying. We want the truth of the word unclouded by false teachers. And Lisa says that the truth is more important than how passionate and emotional you are. Jason comes back and he says, well, actually all that matters is love, which is what Jesus taught us. We must be rooted in the love of God. And Martin, he says that he respects Aaron Abke for doing this, but that Wes unfortunately doesn't have the open heart or open mind to really have an open conversation about this. Williams on the other side of the aisle says that Aaron and Kim are focused on what they want, but Wes and Stephen are focused on what is. Justin Miller, he adds, this whole debate is a reminder of how what depth people will go to fit their narrative over the truth into the Bible. Chris says that it's facts over feelings, guys. Facts over feelings. With Monkey Corporation, shout out Mercury Corporation, whoever that is. He says that it's not facts over feelings, it's facts and feelings being aligned at the God level. Marjorie says that it's not facts alone, Jesus showed compassion and empathy, so on and so forth, back and forth it goes. The only comment that I found that kind of fell in the middle was by Johnny. Johnny, he said that it comes down to one side believing their God in Christ and the other side believing traditional standard teachings. They're both just interpreting it from their worldviews, which are almost polar opposite. And I think this really hits the key to the almost like animosity that was during the debate, more so from Wes and Stephen towards the other guys, but you can just tell some frustration there. Also, Anton, the guy who hosted the debate, has put out a video with Stephen after the debate trying to discredit Aaron and calling him deceptive, kind of like a character assassination attempt. So there is a lot of conflict here. I think it's going to boil and become even more heated and intense. Aaron has said that him and Cam will make a response video to the video that Stephen and Anton made. So things are heating up and moving far away from something that I would consider a friendly debate. Why is this? Well, if we look at it from a neurological perspective, we can really see that Wes and Stephen are coming from a very left brain oriented perspective. Whereas Aaron and Cam come from a more right brain oriented perspective, right? So the left brain is analysis, reasoning, objective facts, science and language, and the nitty-gritty details. Whereas the right brain is more about creativity, intuition, your subjective feelings and viewpoints. It's quite musical and artistic as well, less scientific, but it sees the big picture, is more holistic in its way of cognition. If we were to compare these two sides of the brain to a planet, it would be Mercury, the left side of the brain, and Venus, the right side of the brain, which connect to the respective sides of the body, right? So the right side of the brain, the Venus brain, connects with the left side of the body, whereas the left brain, the Mercury brain, connects with the right side of the body. If you look at Kabbalah, we have the two spheres of Hod and Netzach, which govern the right and left side of the body. So they are basically the same, right? Netzach, Venus, connecting to the right side of the brain, the intuitive, creative, emotional side, and Hod, Mercury, with the left side, having to do with logic and intellect. So basically, they're coming from these different perspectives. But why does that need to be catastrophic? Why does that need to be so much conflict, right? Well, if we look at Kabbalah and compare it to Tarot, a system that is actually comparable with Kabbalah, you can actually take all the cards from the Tarot and put it on the Tree of Life. The card that fits between Hod and Netzach, between the two sides of the brain, is called the Tower. The Tower is the catastrophe card. It shows a tower that is hit by a lightning strike, the tower crashing, and people falling out of it. It straight up looks like 9/11. Alan Moore, the magician and legendary comic book writer of Watchmen and V for Vendetta, he suggests that the reason why the catastrophe card of the Tower is positioned between them is because it's very, very difficult to reconcile fact and feeling, logic and love, thinking and emotions, right? It's like trying to reason your emotions or trying to have emotions govern your reason never bodes well. We also see this in politics, right? In America, the left and the right, where the left are more on the Netzach, right brain hemisphere is more about empathy and compassion, where the others are more about logic and reason, and just see how much they are clashing to a quite a disastrous level where we are like, is it going to be like going to be a civil war raging throughout the whole country? You know, and we see so much animosity online and with the Trump and Kamala Harris election and all that. So it's quite evident that this is a split in our personality. We all have a split personality condition. To really harmonize them and create a beautiful, harmonious human personality, we need Tiferet. Tiferet is the sixth sphere on the Tree of Life and is what we essentially would call Christ consciousness. You see, many Christians, they see Jesus as literally being Christ, whereas a guy like Aaron Abke, and myself included, we distinguish between the man and the consciousness, right?
God is the way we are aware. God is the consciousness by which we know ourselves. And so in the I am statements of Jesus, I read them and interpret them as Jesus speaking from that state, the I am state.
The idea is that Jesus was a man who attained the level of enlightenment at the sixth solar sphere of Tiferet. You see, Tiferet is Keter, God on a lower arc. It's Keter lowered into the human domain so that we can interact with it and if you will, be liberated from our suffering. So what do? How do we unify these sides of our brain, these sides of our psyche? Well, to bring home in a very literal sense, a Christian message, I would point to the sphere of Tiferet. Tiferet, if you were to use Christian vernacular, would be Christ. Not Jesus, but Christ. We need to distinguish between the man and the state of consciousness, which is what Aaron Abke does, right? He sees Jesus as a man to be loved, admired, looked up to, not because he is God, but because he raised himself to the level of being considered a son of God. Tiferet being Keter, God on a lower arc. Tiferet means beauty, beauty being the result of a harmonious whole, right? Whether you look at a harmonious landscape, that is very beautiful, a harmonious symphony that sounds very beautiful, or a harmonious body that appears very beautiful. The same is the case with our psyche. And we need Tiferet, we need Christ consciousness to really harmonize and balance each part of our psyche. So that's what I want to end this video with. Because we're seeing quite a lot of conflict right now, we're seeing a lot of debate, we're seeing a lot of heads and egos clashing, a lot of hearts and minds clashing because of this debate, and just in general in society. So what I would like to invite you, the viewer, to do is to connect with Tiferet. How do you do that? Well, if you take the Tree of Life on the human anatomy, Tiferet is connected with the heart. So tune into your heart and its wisdom and its guidance, and you will find that the two sides of your brain, Hod and Netzach, Mercury and Venus, the intellect and the emotions, logic and love, will become harmonized. Thank you for watching. Take care.